Hi, everybody. Welcome to the KC CHIROpulse podcast, brought to you by CATS Consultants, helping doctors keep their pulse on success. So I'm joined today with my good friend, Dr. Troy Fox, and I'm Dr. Michael Perusich. We are the hosts of KC CHIROpulse. So glad you could join us. Troy, what's happening? You're always the keeper of the questions.
Well, one, I'm glad that I don't have to do the intro because that's kind of a tongue twister, and you manage to get through it every time, even with a small stumble every once in a while. But
well, I think we can tell our audience that there have been a few outtakes.
yeah. Every once in a while we have to stop and start over again. So
Usually because we start laughing.
Yeah. I have a question for today rather than one of our viewers' questions. And I want to talk about being engaged in your practice.
Okay.
And what that means, why it's important. It's a topic that you and I discuss a lot. It's a topic that we discussed with our practices. We discuss with clients. We discuss with even non-clients sometimes when they're talking to us. We have people come to us with, a great idea that they had. Hey, what do you think about this? And we talk to them, and engagement always seems to be a part of that equation.
Always.
So tell us what you think about engagement.
Well, engagement's really simple. Engagement equals success. Disengagement equals not success. Pretty simple.
Profound.
Thanks for tuning in today.
Yeah.
But seriously, and we see this all the time. And yes, we do discuss this topic all the time. But we see doctors, the ones who are engaged, the ones who are going for extra training, reading on their own, staying motivated, doing development with their staff, team building, keeping staff engaged, creating goals, and not just goals, but simple actionable steps towards those goals, stopping once in a while and evaluating their clinic. And I could go on there, but those are the doctors who are the most successful, period. End of story. If there's some doctor out there that's completely disengaged and successful, I'm going to tell you right now, they're not as successful as they could be. Mm-hmm. So to get to those next levels requires engagement. And engagement takes on many different forms. It's not just coming to the office every day and seeing a bunch of patients, treating a bunch of patients, examining a bunch of new patients, and walking back out the door at the end of the day. It's about physically and mentally being engaged in the entire function of your practice and in your community. And
I would agree.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuts and bolts to this, honestly. Mm-hmm. Seeking out additional education, training, knowledge about the profession, knowledge about just research out there. I like to read a lot of different types of research, brain research, for example. And you might be thinking, well, what the heck does that have to do with chiropractic care? It makes you sound smart when you pop off to a patient something about something that sounds like it's outside of your healthcare treatment regimen paradigm. It makes you sound smart, but more importantly, it keeps you engaged in just what's happening in the world. Mm-hmm. So I think those kind of things are incredibly important. Making sure that you're putting training opportunities in front of your staff. Right now is not a great time to be hiring staff, so maybe try not to lose them. And one of the things that keeps staff wanting to stay with you is keeping them engaged. Staff development, staff training, team building, and all three of those things are different from each other. Doing those kind of things is what keeps people engaged and ingratiated into your practice. There's a reason why you and I had employees who are with us forever. I mean, right. Marissa and I, who's still with us in the consulting business and an integral part of it. She and I worked together, and you've known her this long for I think over 20 years. I think we're going on 21 years or something. It's not because I had her just sit and answer phones and process insurance every day. I got her engaged in what we were doing, and man, she just took off with it. And it's paid me back tenfold by doing that, because she's so engaged that she helps drive the business in the direction that I hope it goes. So, yeah, I hear a lot of doctors say, "Oh, that just takes time. That takes time away from from seeing patients and so forth. Okay, none of you are that busy that you don't have 5 minutes to do a huddle in the morning, 30
Right.
minutes to do a staff meeting once a week, and once a quarter, do a 2-hour team building session, or a 3-hour, or a 4-hour, or once a year, just take a day off and just go do something out of the office together, something different. What's the old adage? Go ahead. I know you're wanting to say something there.
I was going to say the big engagement killer is being closed off. And I don't mean just closed off to others, but closed off to new ideas as well. So sometimes when we get to running with our heads down, we're not paying attention to what the feedback that we're getting from staff, who oftentimes spend a lot more time with patients than we do.
Right.
And they're trying to give us feedback. And I've been guilty of this. I've been guilty of times when I've run with my head down and I'm not engaged. I think I'm engaged, but what I'm engaged in is literally running with my head down and not looking at the opportunities in front of me. Right. So a big engagement killer is being closed off. If you're closed off as a doctor to your whole staff all the time, and I again, learn from experience. I've heard that from my staff before. It would really be nice if doctor would just spend, one meal with us when we went to a seminar or something like that. We'd like to spend time with the doctor. That tells you that you're not spending enough time with your staff. That was a good warning signal for me, and I learned from it. And that was early on in my practice when I was a young male, didn't really know that I had to communicate with my staff to be successful, realized that they had a lot of great things to offer. And so I learned from that. And so I learned to be more open to my staff. I learned to be more open to what my patients were saying. I wanted to hear what they had to say, not just have concern that maybe they were going to say something I didn't want to hear. And so instead of walling off and closing off from my patients and my staff, I was an open door. And as a result, and I know you were the same way, as a result, we developed really good habits ourselves because we'd listen to each other and others in the area as well, just from a standpoint of, hey, what are you doing? What can you do to improve personally? And then we also learned what each other was doing in our offices to help our staffs out. Sorry, my phone is ringing in the middle of me doing this, so I'm not engaged.
I didn't notice it, but I was so engaged in what you were saying, I didn't notice.
Let me shut that thing off. I thought I had it completely silent, but yeah. So the being engaged part of it is something that you do on a daily basis, and it's something that your staff can feel, your patients can feel when you're engaged. I mean, it's one thing to be excited to be in the office. It's another thing to be engaged to the point of where you realize that you are in a constant learning environment.
Right. And I think you have to, so quote Napoleon Hill, what you think about comes about, right? What you think about comes about. And I want to take that a step deeper. You have to surround yourself to be fully engaged, to be in full throttle engagement. You have to surround yourself with as much positivity as you possibly can. Now, we have patients coming in. A lot of them hurting. They're grumpy as a result. You're giving them a lot of your energy. You need to engage your staff to be able to recharge you. You need to be engaged enough in the process to know when you need to be recharged. Part of engagement is knowing when to take time off, when to seek out motivation, when you need a more powerful or positive message around you. And this is important. This is why you can't just be head down chiropractic all the time. One of the things you and I used to do, we'd go to chiropractic seminars together, but we would spend an enormous amount of time just free thinking, just coming up with ideas. Even beyond just what are we doing? What are you doing in your office? What am I doing in my office? It was a lot of, what if we did this? What would happen if you did this? Hey, I was reading this about this, making up a story here, but computer company that got really innovative with their marketing. What if we brought that idea into our practices? And that's where the great ideas would come from. And when you do this with your staff too, when they're so engaged that they want to bring their ideas to the table, because you know what? They have a different perspective about your practice than you do. So use that but you have to get them engaged before they're comfortable. So you have to create a culture of engagement. It's called a culture of maturity. If you've ever read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Covey talks about this. You create a culture of maturity in your office, which doesn't mean you surround yourself with older people. It means you surround yourself with people who get it, that it's okay to be engaged and have a voice and say what's on your mind, and create that constant process of leading towards success. That's where success comes from. It's not about being head down every day and doing the same thing over and over and over again. And, oh, did we hit an arbitrary new patient mark this month? It's about how engaged you are. And the more engaged you are, the more it rubs off on your staff. The more engaged you are as a team, the more it rubs off on your patients. They become engaged. And the more engaged your patients become, the more engaged your business becomes in the community. And if you want to build a big practice, if we dissected how you and I built big practices, this is the bottom line of where it started. We got everybody supercharged engaged. I'm going to write a book called Supercharge Engaged.
Yeah.
That's my next book. But and so let me now back up a little bit. So when you miss a coaching call, when you talk to your chiropractor buddy down the street who's having a bad day and just wants to say, nothing works in practice anymore, you might as well close your doors and burn the place down. When you walk in 5 minutes before you start seeing patients and you're the first one out the door at the end of the day, and you take the entire 2 hours at lunch to go have lunch, and you never talk to your staff and you never do any training, and you miss opportunities for training. I could go on and on and on here. I'm not telling you have to drink from a fire hose to be engaged, but you have to be intentional about taking advantage of those opportunities. And once in a while, you got to get off the chiropractic mouse wheel to engage yourself. Whether it's reading a motivational book, watching a motivational program, I like to read about other successful companies outside of our industry that just charges me. Take a vacation. I can't tell you how many docs in the last, 2 or 3 weeks I've talked to who said, I don't ever take a vacation because I'm afraid to be gone from my practice. That's a doctor who is disengaged and buried by the weeds. Because if your practice is in that shape that you can't ever leave, that just tells me immediately that you're not engaged enough in what's going on.
And I think you brought up a good point with staff, because staff meetings sometimes become the let's go over numbers, because we're trying to run a business and we think that's the best way to do it is go over numbers, and we're either up or we're down. We're better in this, we're better in this, we're worse in this. We need to make changes in this. And that becomes very mundane for the staff. I think staff need to learn more about what you do in your practice. Sometimes they need to go off course a little bit and learn about something completely unrelated, but actually is related. When we talk about mind theories and we talk about the psychology of the patient, sometimes those things help our staff as well to enrich the experience for our patients. And that's really what we want. If you're going to have a great practice, it's not all about the numbers. Numbers are important. We can statistically track any practice and kind of see where you're at, but numbers don't create the practice. Numbers are basically the litmus test of where your practice is at. When rubber meets the road, it's these practices that we talk about from being engaged. And I mean, there's 101 different things that we could go through, but when I worked with staff, there were times early in my practice that I was in that rut. Again, it's very easy to explain what you did wrong because you can look in the rear view mirror and go, I learned from that experience. And what we learned from that experience was when you work with staff, you need to help enrich their experience as well. When you enrich their experience and you're not just talking numbers and here's what we did wrong this last week, or so-and-so was irritated when they came into the practice because of such and such, who did that kind of thing. The gotcha meeting, we don't want that. What we want is we want to celebrate the successes.
Yep.
And we want to step in and we want to encourage open dialogue about improvements that we can make. So if you're constantly climbing the hill heading towards improvement, and then you're celebrating the successes that you make, your staff will become engaged.
Yeah. And that's a big one, Troy. Celebrating your successes together. It's huge. Mm-hmm. It's huge. And I would just, at times in staff meetings, I might tell staff the day before, hey, we have a staff meeting tomorrow, bring your favorite quote. And I want to hear why that's your favorite quote. And so we'd sit around. We weren't talking about chiropractic necessarily. It might relate back to it somehow, but everybody tell what their quote was. And the whole point of it was we'd learn a little bit more about that person, and we'd all hear some really positive messages at the same time. So it was just a really good team building opportunity that took like 5 minutes. None of this stuff is hard. It's not hard to be engaged, but you have to plan to be engaged. So, and planning is a whole nother topic. We get into organization. So, this is a good subject.
It is. And you brought up a great point there too with the quotes, because sometimes you have staff that are a little quieter and they're kind of, I won't say standoffish, but they stand in the back row because they don't know if their voice should be heard or not. And sometimes when you do those little team building exercises, you bring people out of their shell.
Yeah.
And they may have some really phenomenal things, some really phenomenal insight about your practice,
right?
But they've always been in the back row hiding behind someone else. And once you brought them out a little bit and they felt safe and it was okay and it was actually kind of fun to share, then they got engaged as well. And I think that's a really subtle way to engage staff sometimes that are maybe the quiet ones that sit in the back row.
Right. And they can go from being a good staff person to an absolute champion when you do that. Yeah. Hey, this is a great topic. Thanks for bringing this up. I know you said it at the outset that we talk about this all the time because it's hugely important. So everybody, get engaged. And if you want to engage with us, all you have to do is go to katzconsultants.com. In the top right corner of the homepage, you can schedule a breakthrough session. You'll go right to my calendar when you go there. And let's talk about what's going on in your practice. Set aside 30 minutes and let's talk about what's going on in your practice. So we love doing those. We do them for free. People ask us all the time, why do you do those? Well, we like to help doctors, number one. We had great success in chiropractic, still do, and we want to share that. But more importantly, we just enjoy talking to doctors out there. So even if we wind up not becoming working together, creating a working together situation, it's okay. Let's just chat about what's going on in your practice. So, and if you want to submit a question for our podcast, you can submit it to troy@katzconsultants.com. We'd love to hear from you. We won't use your name on air or anything. We won't embarrass you. And remember, there's no bad questions. So if you have a question or a thought, you just want to hear us banter it around, be engaged and send it in to us. All right, Troy, anything else?
I think we've pretty much solved all the world's problems right there, at least for staff meetings and attitude going into your practice. I think this is a great thing to take into work this afternoon as you start a new session, or tomorrow morning, start it. You'll probably freak your staff out because they won't know what to think. They'll be like, where'd our doctor go?
They might. I love it.
He's excited and engaged.
That's right. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the KC CHIROpulse podcast, brought to you by Katz Consultants, helping doctors keep their pulse on success. So again, check us out at katzconsultants.com. And from all of us here, stay well adjusted.